The Expanse earns its tension through very specific details, not just with physics, though it is precise with physics, but with identity. Who corporations are, what they show the world, what they hide, the language people speak when no one important is listening. The specific details are not decoration, it is the foundation. And in the beta for Osiris Reborn, I found something that doesn't quite fit. Welcome, traveler. For those of you who are new to this universe, you are in exactly the right place to start. The Expanse is not like other science fiction. There is no faster-than-light travel, no energy shields, no hand-waved shortcuts. It is humanity, roughly 200 years from now, having clawed its way through the solar system through will and engineering and suffering. 3 factions divide the known world. Earth, overcrowded, powerful, its citizens kept docile by a universal basic income that provides just enough comfort to prevent revolution. Mars, smaller, disciplined, every citizen bound to a dream of terraforming a barren world into something livable. A civilization built on collective sacrifice and collective belief. And then there is the Belt. The asteroid miners, the station workers, the people who dig the resources that Earth and Mars consume without a second thought. They were not born in comfortable gravity. They were born in fractions of a G. On stations, in ships, in corridors where the floor always feels slightly wrong. Their bodies bear that history in ways that cannot be hidden. Taller, longer-limbed, elongated in ways that mark them the moment they walk into a room on Earth or Mars. Their bodies are the ledger of their oppression. You can read it in their bones. And their language, Belter Creole, is one of the most carefully constructed elements of this entire universe. A blend of a dozen Earth tongues spoken by people who were never allowed to claim any single home. It's not just a dialect, it is identity. It is resistance. A culture that survived specifically because no one powerful enough was paying attention to it. The tension between these 3 factions is the engine of everything. And then, beneath all of it, comes the protomolecule. An alien substance billions years old, found in a forgotten corner of the solar system. A corporation called Protogen discovered it and made a choice, not to report it, not to study it carefully, but to weaponize it. Then they tested it on Arrow Station, a bustling rock of over 100,000 people living their ordinary lives. They sealed the airlocks, they infected the population, and then they watched. The Arrows incident is the crack that splits the solar system open. It's not a prelude, it's not a backdrop, it is the beginning of everything. And it is exactly where Osiris Reborn begins. One important note before we go further. The game's lore follows the television show more than the books. If your foundation comes from the screen rather than the page, you are exactly where the story wants you. Your character is on their own journey, separate from the main canon storyline, but running parallel to it. Your character creation begins with the choice that's not just cosmetic. You choose between an Earther or a Belter. In most games that would be aesthetic, but not here. In the Expanse, being Belter means something. It means you have lived under the conditions that Earth and Mars created and never had to survive. It means your body tells a story you cannot hide. And then it gives you a partner, your twin. Your twin Jay travels beside you, speaks to characters you may not be able to reach, and opens conversations that are closed to you alone. What one identity misses, the other catches. It's a structural choice that acknowledges something the Expanse has always understood. No single perspective is enough to see the whole picture. At the time the beta begins, you and your twin are Pinkwater security mercenaries. You are working people in a universe full of working people. who were in the wrong place at the wrong time and came out the other side carrying something that powerful people want back. You survived Eros. That alone makes you extraordinary, because almost no one who was near Eros when it went dark came back to tell what they saw. The question the game is asking from the very first moment is, what does that survival cost you? The beta places you on Pinkwater 4 station, arriving in a stolen ship, carrying information you should not have, and the clock is already moving. The first thing the game asks you to do is look around. The station is a social hub. Civilians, shopkeepers, workers going about their lives, with loot scattered throughout the environment and conversations waiting at every corner. On the surface, it is atmosphere, but there is something more useful buried inside it. Data pads. Scattered through Pinkwater 4 are texts that quietly expand the lore in ways that even the show and the books didn't develop. Technology that the television series introduced but never fully explained. Tiebacks to canonical moments that readers and viewers will recognize immediately. The kind of detail that only gets added by people who genuinely understand what they're working with. The station also has a shopkeeper, Luciana, a single NPC with limited screen time, but she manages to give you conversations you genuinely cannot find anywhere else in the Expanse existing media. Context for the characters around you, a perspective on life in this corner of the solar system that the show's main narrative never had room to explore. I noted her specifically because throwaway NPCs do not usually leave that kind of impression. I will say this honestly. The station hub as it exists in the beta feels more like a theme park of conversations than a living world. Each interaction is pointed at you. The world is reacting to your presence rather than existing independently of it. Maybe that is the beta limitation, and likely a scale limitation, but it is worth naming because the Expanse as a universe has always felt like a world that existed before you arrived and would continue after you left. The full game will need that texture. But one character in the beta stood out above all of it. Zafar. Limited screen time, a single mission, and yet Owlcat made a very specific choice with him. He is consistent. His behavior does not shift based on the decisions you make, regardless of how you play the mission. Regardless of what choices you make or what you choose to reveal, Zafar helps. I went back and played the alternate path. He stayed consistent. Not loyal to your choices, but loyal to who he is. In a universe defined by people who will sell each other out for survival, a character whose help is not conditional is worth filing away. Also worth noting, the zero-G movement. The Expanse has always treated low gravity as a physical reality rather than a gameplay gimmick, and the moments in the beta where you move through it feel correct in a way that matters to the tone. But underneath all this atmosphere, something was already pulling at the edges. It started with a single line of dialogue from your twin. Here is what we know about Protogen from established Expanse canon. They operated in absolute secrecy. Dresden, the architect of the Eros experiment, was not reckless. He was methodical. He believed he was shepherding the next stage of human evolution, and he protected that belief with everything he had. Protogen soldiers wore no insignia, no identifying markers, no branding of any kind. One of their operatives, when cornered and questioned with no way out, refused to give up his organization's identity, even knowing he was about to die. That is not training. That is years of erasure so total it outlasted the will to live. For the Eros infection itself, Protogen hired disposable contractors and gang members from Ceres to execute the work. Even their trusted inner circle only knew what they needed to know. And their vessels, the Amun-Ra stealth ships, were the most classified hardware in the system. So classified that simply knowing they existed, knowing who built them, who operated them, was enough to pull a thread that unraveled Protogen's entire conspiracy. Not a raid, not a confession, information alone. That is how completely their operational identity depended on never being known. And here is where the game begins to create friction before a single shot is fired. In the show, Christian Avasarala, UN Deputy Undersecretary, one of the most politically connected minds on Earth, refers to Protogen as a biotech research company. That is their public face, their cover. Their identity they spent considerable resources building to insulate themselves from scrutiny. Laboratories, not soldiers. Research, not enforcement. In the beta, your twin Jay describes Protogen to you very differently.
Protogen is a private security company just like Pinkwater.
Stop there. A biotech research company and a private security company do not exist in the same space. They do not attract the same clients. They do not explain the same capabilities. One is a corporation with laboratories. The other is a corporation with soldiers. And yet Jay, a Pinkwater mercenary, someone whose professional world is built entirely around knowing who the players in the industry are, has Protogen filed under the wrong category entirely. Either Jay is mistaken, or the information available to your character has been deliberately corrupted. Or the game is presenting a version of Protogen whose public identity is fundamentally different from the one the show has established. So, here's what happens in the beta. After arriving and explaining the situation to O'Connell, a Protogen commander, the Brute, hijacks the comms of Pinkwater 4 Station and broadcasts to everyone inside openly. She announces they are Protogen Corporation and that they are there to recover the stolen ship you arrived in. The troops that pour in behind her? Purple uniforms. The Protogen logo on every single one. Power armor branded with Protogen's name. And look more closely at that armor, traveler. Because what is woven into the plating appears to carry a signature of the protomolecule itself. In one mission, Protogen has publicly identified themselves, their classified vessel, and their operational interest in what happened on Eros. In front of a station full of witnesses at the exact moment in their timeline when secrecy was the only thing keeping the Eros experiment alive. That is the first thread, traveler. Now, let me show you the second. If you played the beta as a belter, and I want to talk about why that choice matters, you will have noticed something missing. Not absent the way a feature is not yet built, but missing the way a voice is missing from a room where it should be the loudest one in it. The Belter Creole is not a detail in the Expanse. It is a cultural spine. Born from a dozen Earth languages fused together by people who were never given a home to anchor their identity to. It carries its own grammatical logic, its own emotional register, its own way of saying things no other language quite captures. It developed in the margins of the solar system, in the asteroids, in the belt stations, in the places where Earth and Mars were not watching, and it survived there for generations. In the show, you hear it everywhere. In arguments, in celebrations, in the quiet moments when belters are alone. That is the key detail, traveler. In private, belters speak belter. In Osiris Reborn's beta, a game that asks you to play as a belter, to wear belter physiology, to navigate a world that marks you as a belter the moment you walk through the door, the Creole is almost entirely absent. There is one datapad with written belter text. One. But here is what pressed on me the most. If you choose to play as a belter and your twin is also a belter, two people who grew up in the belt, who carry it in their elongated frames, who have lived every consequence of that identity, they speak to each other in standard English. No Creole, no cultural inflection, Not a single phrase. 2 Belters, in private, speaking the language of the people who exploited them. In a few scenes with your twin, your character even responds with standard English, where every version of the Expanse that came before would have had them code switch. That gap is not subtle once you see it. In every version of the Expanse that has existed before the game, this would be unthinkable. Because the Creole is not just communication, it is proof that the Belt still exists as a culture rather than just a labor class. It is the thing that was not taken from them. Its absence from the game's foundational character experience is not a small inconsistency. It is the erasure of the Belt's most visible marker of resistance. And that, alongside the Protogen announcement, is what makes the beta worth examining carefully. So, we have 2 threads, Traveler. One is a corporate conspiracy built entirely on anonymity, loudly announcing itself in a room full of witnesses. The other is a culture that built itself on language as survival, and that language has been almost entirely silenced. Both create friction with established canon, and I have sat with both questions long enough to offer you 3 ways to read them together. The first is that both are beta limitations. Owlcat has been transparent that this build was focused on gathering feedback on mechanics. Combat feel, dialogue systems, how consequential choices register to the player. Story texture and cultural depth are frequently the last layers applied in development. The faction reputation system the community is already hoping for, the ability to build meaningful relationships with Pinkwater, Protogen, the MCRN, the OPA, and those relationships change what doors open and close to you, that system is not in the beta either. If Belter Creole and Protogen operational secrecy are story layer details, they may simply not have been switched on yet. The second is deliberate accessibility. A game based on an existing IP carries a dual obligation. Serve the people who have read every novel and watched every episode, and welcome the people meeting this universe for the first time. If Protogen announces themselves clearly, a new player immediately understands the threat without having to already know the mythology. If the Belter Creole is compressed or absent, players unfamiliar with it are not alienated in their opening hour. That is not always the right call. I don't think it is here. But it is a real decision that studios make, and it is worth naming honestly. The third, and this is the reading I find the most worth holding, is that both of these choices are intentional signals. What if the Protogen announcement is not a break in their secrecy, but a consequence of what you carry? Your stolen ship is the Mott, possibly an Amun-Ra vessel, the most classified hardware Protogen owns, now in the hands of 2 Pinkwater mercenaries who survived Eros and know way too much. If that ship reaches the wrong people, if what is stored on it can be decrypted and understood, the entire Eros experiment unravels before it reaches its conclusion. In that context, a Protogen commander breaking protocol to reclaim that specific vessel is not sloppiness, it is panic. And the Belter silence? That too could be the thread being laid rather than a detail being omitted. A world in which Belter identity has been so thoroughly suppressed by this point in the timeline that even between themselves, the language is fracturing. Not a cultural oversight, but a cultural wound, written quietly into the game without calling attention to itself. I am not telling you either is correct. I am telling you that if they are intentional, if this is deliberate craft rather than development compression, then we are not watching a studio making a game about the Expanse. We are watching a studio extend it. What the beta also gives us in the margins of its single compressed mission is a sense of the scale Owlcat intends to fill. The locations being built toward are significant ones, Traveler. Ganymede, Jupiter's largest moon, one of the most important food production stations in the solar system, and a place whose story in the Expanse is far from peaceful. Mars, the discipline, terraforming civilization that has sacrificed generations for a dream still just out of reach. A place that will feel very different depending on whether you arrive as a Martian, an Earther, or a Belter. This is not a game confined to a single corner of the solar system. It is an invitation to move through it. And moving through it, you will hear about James Holden. You won't meet him or probably join him, but you'll hear about him. The main story of The Expanse is still unfolding, on its own timeline with its own crew. The beta makes this explicit. News reports filter through the station's comms, and NPCs speak in measured tones about what Holden is saying, what Holden is doing. A few of them say plainly they will not believe what happened on Eros until they hear directly from him. That is a careful narrative choice, and it says something important about the story Osiris Reborn is actually telling. In a universe where the powerful control what information survives, where Protogen can execute a mass casualty event and file it under research, the question of who gets to tell the story and who gets believed when they tell it is everything. You survived Eros. You have evidence. You are carrying a ship that could unravel a conspiracy. And no one is listening yet. If the full game honors what the beta is building towards, this will not be a power fantasy. It will be a story of ordinary people trying to matter in a universe that has already decided they do not. And that is what The Expanse does best. When the full game releases, Traveler, here is what I'll be watching. Does the stolen vessel create real consequences across the full story? Or does Protogen's exposed hand at Pinkwater quietly dissolve into background noise? Does the Belter Creole return? Does the faction reputation system the community is hoping for, the ability to build real relationships with different factions, make it into the final game? Because in an IP that is focused on politics, alliances, and the cost of trust, that system is not really optional. It's the whole point. And do choices at character creation, Earther or Belter, Officer or Hacker, create meaningful different experiences of the universe's inequality? Or do they collapse into the same path once the mission starts? These are the threads I am filing in the archive. Because this is either a studio building the most thoughtful licensed game in years, threading real Expanse DNA into a reactive, lore-faithful world, or it is a compressed beta, and the most important details were simply not switched on. If you made it here, Traveler, thank you, genuinely. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to be here when the full game releases. Every piece of this universe gets filed. I plan on covering not just the game, but the series of The Expanse as well, so nothing gets missed. If you played the beta, if you caught something in the dialogue, the data pads, the environmental details that I did not, the comments are where we work it out together. I read every single one. Or you can check out my full live playthrough right here. The archive is never closed, and I'll see you next time, Traveler.